I don't know if you know this, because in the non-denominational world, we don't celebrate real well like Palm Sunday. So today's Palm Sunday, and I'm not sure why we don't, but we don't always get that right. But it is Palm Sunday, and it begins Holy Week, and I hope that you're getting pumped up for that. Next Sunday, everything changes. Easter changes everything. Even the service times are changing. So I want you to be aware of that. Next Sunday starts 8 o'clock service, and then 9:30 and 11 o'clock. So if you sleep in next weekend, come to the 9:30 service. But we'd love for you to join us at 8 o'clock and kick things off on Easter. We also are going to have a Good Friday evening service at 7 o'clock. It'll be our Easter service. So if you're traveling or if you just want to be able to have the Sunday to be with family and friends and that kind of deal. But if you can come Friday night, that'd be great as well. And we anticipate a great weekend. Our Easter egg hunt on Saturday morning as well is a great event. If you got little kids, it really is a super great time and a great way to introduce your friends to our church as well in a pretty non-threatening moment. Hey, I just want to house kind of issues right now. Several weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago, we mentioned about going multi-site, and we thought that we were going to have a site that we were going to announce to you. In fact, we were sure we had one. It was all pretty clear to us what was happening, and it has gotten yanked away from us. And for whatever reason, it was a facility, a city facility that we thought was going to be available to us, and it is not. And we're still working with the city to try to come to some understandings on why we wouldn't be able to have an offering in their building or anything like that. There's some super weird stuff. Anyway, and that is why we're not having a special Easter offering this year. We've had that in the past. We just did not have a project we could say, here's what we're doing and here's where we're going. And so just some people were asking about that. Are we doing the Easter offering? You certainly welcome to, but we don't have that. So we're kind of back at the square one level of where we were and are the multi-site kind of stuff. So please pray for us. It's been a very frustrating experience. We thought, again, we were that close to hitting the button, and it just didn't work. So sometimes it doesn't work out, and so we refocus and get back to where we're at and what's next, and that's okay. And we're learning some lessons of trust and timing and that's okay. All right, we're closing out today the game show series, and as I kind of overview of the game show series, it's a couple of themes that have struck me. One is that it's basically a leadership series. And when leaders take matters into their own hands, it goes really bad. And when leaders decide to follow God's direction and call on their heart, it goes forward. And so tonight we're going to close out with the Price is Right. And there is a price to be paid for leadership. I love The Price is Right. I think it's a great show. You bid on items and you try to get close and that kind of thing, and you get called down. Last year, Linda and I went to the Price is Right Roadshow. It was here in Omaha. I bought a couple of tickets because I was desperate. I think it was anniversary present or something, and so I just I need something. So I grabbed that, and we had great seats. We were right down front, and I thought this is going to be super lame, but it was super awesome. I had so much fun. We were just laughing, and I didn't want to be called down, but after a while, I think, man, I am super smart. I'm smarter than these other idiots that are up there, and so I can do this. And plus, I have Linda, who's, I just look at her, and she's, and we'd have cleaned up, but didn't get nothing. I didn't get anything, and so it was super fun. But there is always a price to be paid for leadership. And I want us today to look at one of the greatest leaders ever in the Bible, and his name is Nehemiah. And we're not going to have a lot of time to be able to devote to Nehemiah today. I'm just going to give you an intro to him. You need to spend some time in the book of Nehemiah, Old Testament book, and a phenomenal story of leadership and courage and sacrifice. And I'll just kind of give you a little introduction today on the life of Nehemiah. How important is leadership? Well, I think it's very clear that leadership is incredibly valuable in our government, in our homes, in our schools, in our church. And without it, there's very little stability. There are some laws of leadership that I want to share with you, first of all. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing will happen until someone provides leadership for it. Doesn't matter if we have ideas, doesn't matter, we might be an idea person, but if we don't have leadership that will carry things out, it just won't happen. The civil rights movement was not moving forward until a man named Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream," and he provided the leadership to carry it out. When John F. Kennedy shared his dream that one day we would put people on the moon by the end of the decade, it began with that vision, and leadership carried it out. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Most problems can be traced to a lack of good leaders, and we have a leadership shortage in our country right now. Judges 21, let me go back to Proverbs 28:2. When there is moral, this is scary. When there is moral rot within a nation, its government topples easily, but wise wisdom and knowledgeable leaders bring stability. And whether that's in the government or whether that is in our home. When there's moral rot, and we might as well say, when there's moral rot within our home, the home topples easily. That one's probably a whole lot easier to notice or to spot than our government. It's amazing to me what we will tolerate or put up with from our leaders. Morality seems to be a non-issue most of the time. It's amazing to me the folks that we will elect and select to be leaders that have very little to do with a moral compass in their life. We pass it off as if it's no big deal. As long as they're getting the job done, no big deal. As long as what happens there is not going to affect what happens here. Judges 21:25 says, "In those days Israel had no king. All the people did whatever they seemed right in their own eyes." When there is no leadership, the people will do whatever they want. Whatever seems right. We notice this all the time when we have a lack of leadership, and we'll just default to doing our own thing. And this is usually how we determine what we will do. If it feels good, do it. If it feels good, do it. Nothing's going to happen until someone provides leadership for it. There's another law that I learned over the years is that leadership is influence. I heard John Maxwell say at a conference one time that leadership can be boiled down to the word influence. It's always stuck with me. There's good leaders, there's bad leaders. There's positive leaders, there's negative leaders. But all those leaders have influence. You can show up, in fact, you can show up at your kid's grade school playground and you can spot who the leaders are. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes to figure out who's leading this group. I've sat in meetings where it was easy to figure out who the leader was. It's the person who everybody looks to for answers. There might be a chairman of the board, but he or she may not be the leader. You don't need a title for that. Every time you influence someone, you're assuming leadership. And age has nothing to do with it. Degrees have nothing to do with it. Titles have nothing to do with it. You might have the title, you might have the degree, but you might need to look behind to see if anybody's following you, and that will determine who's leading. Many people have the authority, but they don't have the influence. And if you have to remind people that you are the leader, your leadership influence begins to go away. This is true in the boardroom, it's true in the living room. Guys, the moment you announce that you are the leader of your home, and you're going to do it your way because God has told you that, you are going to lose influence in your home. Somebody might go along with it for a while. Or when you say to your kid, "Because I say so," It's a very weak position to motivate from. And occasionally you have to use that line. But it doesn't work very well for very long because resentment becomes to be the part of the home. It creeps in. You cannot force someone to follow you no matter how hard you want that to happen. You might be the boss, but if you play that card for very long, your influence diminishes. Leadership is influence. Another law that is important in leadership is that character matters more than charisma. Character matters more than charisma. A while back on a children's quiz show, a kid was asked, what do you call a person who speaks through a dummy without moving their lips? The child hesitated for a moment. She said, evangelist? A lot of TV evangelists have a lot of charisma, but they bomb out because of character. You don't have to have charisma to be a leader, but you do need to have character. No one's going to follow you if you don't have credibility. D.L. Moody says that character is what you are when nobody is looking. It's easy to have good character when somebody's got the spotlight on you, but when you're all alone. Leaders come in all shapes and sizes and personalities. There's not one leadership personality. There's not one like, oh, that person's got a lot of charisma. They're the leader. Not necessarily. God's going to use your personality, but you look at leaders in the Bible, they're all different. Last year, I attended a mentoring retreat. As part of this retreat, there was 8 pastors there, and we took this personality test, which I just hate personality tests. It's like, oh, really? Do we have to take? And I knew we were going to have to take that test. I thought, oh, no. And you go online, you take this thing, and I know. And the reason I don't like personality tests is because I know I will fail the test. They're going to come back and go, you don't have a personality. And I just know this is going to be a struggle. I know what it's going to say. I take them all the time, and for some reason, people think I should take them, and I take them, and every time it's the same thing. And I try my best sometimes, because you could kind of like look at that and go, oh, I bet they want me to answer this. And now it comes back the same way every time. It's like, oh, great. There was one pastor there that I had aligned with pretty closely in personality, and we were the only introverts in the group. And I thought that was interesting. Also, our churches were the largest of anybody in the group as well. Most of the time, people think you can't be an introvert if you're going to be a leader. But God can still use us introverts to do stuff. Nehemiah was a man of God, but he was an ordinary man. But he did have character. The fact is, if you try to be like somebody else, and I always thought, I need to be more like, right? Have you ever thought that? I need to be more like. And I'd go to these conferences, and I'd go to these things, and if I could just be more like. And you try to force yourself into that kind of role and look and thought and personality and style and charisma. But if you're not comfortable with who you are, you will always struggle with leadership. Hebrews 13, 7-8 says, remember your leaders who taught you the word of God. Think of all the good that has come from their lives and follow their example of their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I do think that I don't have to adopt somebody's personality, but I can emulate somebody's faith. Does their walk match their talk? Do they have faith worth imitating? Would you want your kids to imitate your faith? Would you want your employees to imitate your faith? Would you want your kids on your ball team to imitate your faith? It's all about character. Another law of leadership is that leadership is learned. Philippians 4:9 says, keep putting into practice all you have learned and received from me. Everything you heard from me and saw me doing, then God, the God of peace, will be with you. Leadership is about the choices we make, and we can learn how to make good choices. You can put 2 people in the same room, give them the same opportunities. One washes out, one does really well. It's because of the choices they make. Jesus spent 3 years with 12 men. And out of those 12 men, he chose 3 to really focus in on. They were constantly learning from him. So let's talk. Those are some leadership laws. I encourage you to kind of think through that kind of stuff and maybe go back over it. I want to talk today a little bit about Nehemiah. Nehemiah, in Old Testament, in 586 BC, the city of Jerusalem is destroyed. The Jews are taken to Babylon, which is now modern-day Iraq. They're kept there for 70 years. In 537 BC, the first group of Jews were allowed to begin to return home. In 516, the temple was rebuilt. In 478, Ezra leads a second group to Jerusalem. In 445, Nehemiah asked to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls of the city. The problem was the city of Jerusalem was vulnerable to attack. The best walls of defense were actually, for a city or for a nation was to build big and strong walls so the people couldn't penetrate their fortress. If you don't have a strong wall, you were defenseless and you were usually scared and embarrassed. The reason they had been in captivity in the first place was because of their sin as a nation. And God told them to get their act together or they would be open to attack. And that is exactly what happened. They were unwilling to follow God and obey his commands. And they had been taken over by another nation. Now the temple had been rebuilt, but they were still a defeated people because their walls were down and they needed a leader. Here's Nehemiah, Nehemiah 1 through 4. These are the memoirs of Nehemiah, the son of Hekeliah. In the late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Xerxes' reigns, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me from some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, things are not going well for those who are returned to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Now it says that he was in Susa, which is not the capital of Persia. It's kind of like the summer home for the king. So they're at the summer home for the king, and they're having a pretty good time. And it says that Nehemiah was the cupbearer, which I always thought was a pretty it's an important position, but fairly insignificant, basically meaning like as far as leadership. But the cupbearer would be the guy who would drink the wine before the king tasted it in case somebody had poisoned the wine. And in those days, that was how you got rid of the king. If you didn't like the king, you'd poison him. And so the cupbearer had this scary job because if people didn't like the king, you were in trouble. But not only was he protected the king, but he was the prime minister of the government. And that's a pretty big deal because Nehemiah was a Jew. He was a Jew who had been born now in Babylon, but he was still a Jew. And he rises to an incredibly prominent position. Nehemiah receives word that Jerusalem is in a mess. It's all bad news when he hears it, and it hits him hard. He cries, and he goes to God, and he prays, and he fasts, and he's embarrassed, and he's sad, and it lasts for days. If you want to learn about prayer, you need to read the book of Nehemiah because there's more prayers in the book of Nehemiah than any book in the Bible. So what makes Nehemiah a great leader? Because he begins this process of figuring out how are we going to solve the problem of the fact that the city of Jerusalem is vulnerable to attack. What makes a good leader? Nehemiah was sensitive to the needs around him. Most of the time, we don't see the problems. We've built up a way of looking at life. Even if we see somebody that's struggling, we go past them. We're pretty insulated even here in the middle of the Midwest. Plus, we see, oftentimes I think we see this overload of disaster all the time on TV, and we get fairly calloused about it. You know, when we have the first disaster, we all rally. Then we have another one and another one and another one. We go, oh, that's too bad. We have a tornado that devastates a community, and everybody goes around and gets rallied. And then we have another one and another one. And you're like, oh, they're kind of on their own. I don't think, and we just kind of get built up, and we have these disasters that take place. It's not, though, enough to be sensitive. We can watch a TV commercial or watch even a documentary, and we can get sad. And in fact, I talk with people all the time that are concerned. They're concerned about problems. They just don't do anything about it. They talk a big game, but there's little action. Nehemiah not only saw the need, but he begins to decide to do something about it. And Nehemiah had been trustworthy, and he begins to ask the king of Persia if they would be willing to help the nation of Judah. Luke 16, 10 through 13. So if you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with great responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches of heaven? And if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with your things of your own? No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one or love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the others. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, usually we focus in on that. You can't serve God and money. And, people go like, oh, yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. And again, you can argue with this, like I can serve God and money at the same time. And no, you can't. You can't pull that off. But this is really talking about more than just that. It's kind of like it's talking about leadership. If you want to be a leader in a spiritual world, you really have to be able to handle worldly stuff as well. Why would God trust you with with spiritual things if you can't handle worldly stuff? If you can't handle money, God says, if you can't handle money and figure out how to do that, you're not going to be able to be a leader in a spiritual sense. There's just no way. And it's kind of like, well, yes, I can. Again, it's like, what does it matter how I handle my money? Because it's a character issue, and if you can't figure that out, that's why we have decided we're going to really work hard at helping people understand how to handle money. So we have these Dave Ramsey courses and Financial Peace University thing, because as we look around in our culture and our world, it's like we see people who's messed up financially, and we've got to deal with that because we're working in a spiritual world and we're trying to help people do that. But God says you can't be a leader in one spot if you can't figure it out here. And so God's testing us all the time. Money, by the way, is a test to see if we're trustworthy. Money is a test. And if you can't handle a little bit, why would you be able to handle a lot? Does it just make any sense? Why would God say, I gave you a little bit, you didn't do well with that, now why would you have more? You cannot serve both God and money. What a sad commentary here. The Pharisees, in fact, he's talking to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees loved money. Does the love of money keep us from loving the right things? And usually, yes, it does. So Nehemiah was sensitive to things around him, and he had been found trustworthy over the years, so that the king finally says, I will finance the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. There's no way a king would give Nehemiah that money if Nehemiah had not been trustworthy. Nehemiah was available. Another thing that we find out about Nehemiah. Now, I think people are like, well, you need to be available. What does that mean? I think Nehemiah wasn't just like, oh, I wonder what I should do tomorrow. He's not sitting around like, hey, I'm retired. I don't have anything to do. If you're retired, obviously you're available. You know what? But if you're not, you obviously are available if you want to be. Nehemiah was not sitting around thinking, hey, I wonder what's going to happen. He was simply, he realized, well, I'm going to make myself available. The less time Jesus had on earth, the more he knew he needed to make himself available to people. I like what Bob Goff says to do when someone calls and says, hey, can we get together in a couple of weeks? I need to talk. Bob always says, well, how about we talk right now? If you call me in a couple of weeks, I'm probably going to say, how about we talk right now? I mean, Bob is just saying, you got to be available right now. Don't let the call go to voicemail. By the way, Bob says, if you let the call go to voicemail, you think you're more important than that phone call. Now, you might have to quit doing some stuff in order to do this. You can quit eating meat on Fridays for 4 times a year, or you could climb a little higher on the tree of sacrifice. You can cut out cussing, but if you cut out, but so what? Even good stuff, so you need to sometimes cut out good stuff so you create a little bit more margin in your life to be able to be available. If you're so busy, you have made yourself unavailable. The best leaders I know are super busy people, but they are always available to me. When the situation called for somebody to rebuild the wall, Nehemiah was thousands of miles away. He's thousands of miles away from Jerusalem, and it would have been very easy for Nehemiah to say, you know what, I don't think I can do it. I'm not even in Jerusalem. It was going to take him 2 months of riding a camel to get to Jerusalem. Even if he left that moment, he was still 2 months away. He was not a contractor. He was not a fundraiser. He was a cupbearer. But that wall wasn't going to get built until somebody provided the leadership for it. Occasionally, I have people say to me around here, hey, Mark, we really need this at StoneBridge. I was thinking about this the other day. I think we need to do this. I think we need to do this. And by the way, I have people tell me that all the time. And I think that's great. I want people to always have those kind of ideas. We need to be an entrepreneurial kind of spirit-filled church that says, hey, if you got an idea that probably is from God, let's do it. But oftentimes when people say, hey, I think, Mark, we should do this at StoneBridge, I know what they're saying. Mark, you need to do this at StoneBridge. I got this idea for you, Pastor. See, it would have been very easy for Nehemiah to say, you know, I got this great idea for the people in Jerusalem. They should rebuild that wall. It's a disgrace. That's terrible. Can't believe those walls are, the people in Jerusalem need to build that wall. Right? Sure. And the people of Jerusalem are like, okay, we know that. But we don't have any money. We don't have anybody can help us do that. We need leadership. It's very easy, I think, for Nehemiah, he could have said, this can't believe nobody built that wall yet. But what Nehemiah did was say, you know what, I think I'm supposed to be doing that. And he led the effort to rebuild that wall, and it happened in just a few days. We just don't do ministry around here without leadership. Somebody might have an idea for doing ministry stuff. Hey, I think we should start this. I think we should start this. And by the way, it won't happen unless there's a leader. It just won't happen. We might have great ideas, but until we have leaders to do that, it just won't happen. You might even think, well, you know what? I think somebody should start a Bible study in our area because we live out here. Okay. Preacher, you should do that. What? I think that was your vision. We should probably start right? Okay. Because if you're sensitive to the needs around you, let's just start there. If you want to be a leader in your home, men, be sensitive to the needs of your wife. Somebody should vacuum. Maybe the leader should do that. Somebody should. What? Somebody around here should. Are you sensitive to the needs of your kids? Are you sensitive to the greatest needs of your church? When Nehemiah heard the words of what was happening in Jerusalem, it broke his heart. It broke his heart. He cried all night long. Has it been a while since you lost sleep over something? Has it been a while since you cried tears because you heard about the needs in your town, your community, your church, or your home? What would you do? Now, the price for leadership is going to be costly. There's no doubt about it. It will take a high price to be paid. It was the price that cost Jesus everything. We celebrate that today. All right. Father God, at this moment, perhaps there's even been a few little ideas popping in people's heads on leadership issues right now. Maybe they're thinking, you know what, I really wish we'd have more of this in our church. I really wish we had more of this in our church. Or I see us kind of missing out on this. Or, you know what, I really think I should probably be starting a Bible study or leading a ministry of some kind. And maybe that's happening even right now. Or maybe somebody needs to say, you know what, there's been a lack of leadership in our home. We've just kind of let things slide. We pretend as if we didn't even notice. It doesn't even bother us anymore. And we're not leading, nobody's leading, and so everybody's doing their own thing. And I do pray that people will begin to take a step towards leadership, and maybe their heart's breaking for some issue or something or some ministry. I sure hope somebody's heart's breaking this today for lost people in our city, and it causes them to think about it and do something about it. We know there's a lot of people in our city that don't know you. And somebody needs to do something about that. So here we are, willing and available. In Christ's name.